So if you remember, we talked about the two separate governments right now that are working in Kansas, right? We have the pro-slavery government working, and we have this anti-slavery government. So I said that the pro-slavery government is primarily working in the city of Lecompton, right? They're meeting in Lecompton, and that's where their Congress is meeting. Well, the sort of equivalent of that is the city of Lawrence. Lawrence is where the anti-slavery movement is really based out of for Kansas. So we're going to start to see some drama with Lawrence right about now. So in November of 1855, there was actually a shooting of pro-slavery people by some anti-slavery settlers in Lawrence, and some, pro-slavery people and people in the South hear about it, and they want, revenge. So who's right next door to Kansas to sort of help bring that revenge? But Missouri. So to retaliate, about 1,500 people from Missouri get on horseback and ride into Kansas, heading for Lawrence. To sort of bring the pain, so to speak, and get revenge for those pro-slavery settlers who were killed. So the federal government finds out about this, and they send federal troops to stop the Missourians from getting involved here and from attacking Lawrence, and they have them on standby to intervene and keep the peace on the president's orders. They're waiting and waiting and waiting for the order to officially step in and stop them from making it all the way to Lawrence, but that order never comes, and the Missourians just walk right past them. So the Missourians get right outside of Lawrence, and then they hear that it's surrounded by a fortress of backup, so to speak, and they think, let's instead wait, and they decide that they'll, today's not the day for revenge, but their day will come, and they decide to turn around and hold off for a while and see how things go. So in January of 1856, President Franklin Pierce is giving a speech, and he condemns the anti-slavery government in Kansas, the Lawrence government. He says that they're a government of rebels, and he sees the pro-slavery government as the legal one. Now, remember, both of these governments aren't necessarily legal, because the pro-slavery government was elected in a rigged election, and the anti-slavery government wasn't really elected at all. But at least the pro-slavery one was elected. And so because of that, Franklin Pierce sees the pro-slavery government as the legal and the valid one. So he orders some pro-slavery officials to go in and arrest these guys. So those previous people who came in and got ready to attack the city of Lawrence, they volunteer for that job. So a pro-slavery sheriff and about 800 men ride into Lawrence to arrest those rebels. But they don't just arrest them. They do a bunch of damage to the city. They destroy offices of 2 anti-slavery newspapers. They burn a hotel and to the ground. They even burn the anti-slavery governor's house to the ground. They just absolutely start attacking everything. They start looting homes and businesses, stores, all that stuff. Just absolutely lay waste to the town. This is a drawing, sort of an engraving of what Lawrence looked like after the sack of Lawrence. And these anti-slavery newspapers all across the country start reporting on it, and they are the ones that call it the sack of Lawrence. Like when you sack the quarterback, they just totally laid out and laid waste to the city of Lawrence. They call it that because they want to paint the raiders as barbarians to influence and rile up public opinion in the North and get everybody all hyped up and pissed off about it. That's sort of what we really need, is more people pissed off. And one of the people that they get pissed off is this guy, John Brown. So John Brown is a 56-year-old abolitionist. He was very, very much a radical and very intense guy. And he has been very involved in the abolitionist movement, very much an activist. He even had his own house as a stop on the Underground Railroad for a while. So in 1855, when all this stuff starts going on with Kansas, he and his sons moved to Kansas because they want to, obtain some land and help make Kansas a free state. So he settles in a free soil town, so an anti-slavery town called Osawatomie, gets involved in the town government there, appoints himself the captain of the anti-slavery militia there. And then on May 24th of 1856, he hears about what happened in Lawrence and he wants revenge. And so he gets a small group of followers to go with him, and he goes to where he knows some pro-slavery people live. Not the pro-slavery people who attacked Lawrence, some different innocent pro-slavery people, but he goes and he finds 5 pro-slavery settlers, drags them out of their cabins, takes them down to the Pottawatomie Creek, and hacks them to death with broadswords. So, like I said, John Brown is absolutely sort of nuts and a very intense guy. So we've seen 2 perspectives of John Brown. We've got people who see him as either a hero or people who see him as a terrorist. So 2 very different ideas here. So this violence that we see coming from John Brown, it's not going to stop with him. It's just going to keep happening. And eventually Kansas develops this nickname called Bleeding Kansas, because people from both sides are constantly sending in people to try to influence the elections, and it's constantly erupting into violence. So finally, the federal government decides that they need to step in and do an investigation here and see exactly what's going on. So they do this investigation, and they decide that Kansas can't actually have a free election unless we do 3 things to ensure it. Number 1, we need a new census so that we can get a better idea of how many people live in Kansas so we know how many votes are valid. Number 2, we need new impartial judges to interpret all of these votes and make sure that if we have to do a recount, it's done for the right reasons. And then number 3, we need U.S. troops at every polling station to make sure that people are kept safe on polling day and that only people who should be voting are voting. So Civil War breaks out in Kansas after Pottawatomie and what happened at Lawrence. And over the next several months, battles are even going to take place between the anti-slavery and the pro-slavery militias there. So once the federal troops are brought in to obtain peace, that doesn't really make much of a difference. They're just like, now that means we got to be sneaky about all of the violence. And they start using guerrilla warfare. That's just going to keep continuing. Sabotage, ambush, surprise attacks, things like that. So the violence is going to just keep going on in Kansas, and by the time it ends, the Civil War begins. And so then the Civil War is going on until 1865, so really none of this violence is going to end in Kansas until the end of the Civil War. So while we're at the brink of this chaos, Kansas is going to become a central issue during the campaign for the presidency of 1856, this election of 1856. So what the country needs right now is a strong leader, right? Someone who can unite us. We're very divided at this point, constantly at the brink of civil war during the 1850s, and we need someone who's going to bring us all together. So the Democrats nominate a guy named James Buchanan. At first, the Southern and Northern Democrats couldn't agree on who they wanted to nominate, but finally, originally they wanted to nominate Stephen Douglas, but the Northern Democrats wouldn't agree. So they finally agreed to nominate this guy, James Buchanan. He was a senator from Pennsylvania. He hasn't even been in the United States for the past several years. He's been in Great Britain as a foreign minister for them, so he hasn't been involved in this dispute over slavery, so they think that he's a fresh face and someone who can bring a new perspective to the argument. The Republicans nominate a guy named John Fremont. He's a senator from California and a war hero. He actually led forces across the Rocky Mountains and helped California win the Bear Flag Revolt and helped us annex California. And we also have a third person, Millard Fillmore, who had been a president before this. Millard Fillmore is nominated by the American Party. If you remember the American Party, they are the know-nothings, right? The anti-immigration group. So unfortunately for all of us, James Buchanan wins the presidency and he is elected. And had John Fremont won either Illinois or Indiana, he would have won the presidency. So, it was a very tight race. And James Buchanan really wins for 2 reasons. Number 1, the North had a very heavy immigrant population, and they absolutely were not going to vote for Millard Fillmore. So, instead of voting for John Fremont, a lot of them end up voting for James Buchanan. And reason number 2, Democrats paint the Republicans to look like extremists on the issue of slavery. Some Southerners even threatened to secede if John Fremont won. Big shocker there. But they basically say that Republicans are the party of black people, and they believe that Black people are either, equal or superior to white people. And if you're white, you definitely shouldn't vote for the Republicans because they're crazy. So, unfortunately, like I said, James Buchanan wins. Now, James Buchanan is a total dingus. And in his inaugural address, he thinks that he's going to say some stuff to calm everyone down and get everyone on the same page and, realizing that we're going to settle this dispute about slavery soon. So in his inaugural address, he says that the Supreme Court was just days away from handing down a decision that would settle the problem of slavery for once and for all. And instead of calming down, people are like, oh my God, how does he know this? Is he in cahoots with the Supreme Court? What's going on? So he really just freaks everyone out instead of calming them down, which is what he meant to do. What he was referring to is the Dred Scott decision, which would come 2 days later. So the situation here is that Dred Scott was a former slave, and he's suing his old master because his master had died. He's suing his master's wife for his freedom. He had lived in a free state for most of the 1830s, and his argument was that since he lived where slavery was illegal, that made him free. He lived there because his master, his owner, was a military doctor, and if you know anyone who's in the military or anyone who's family of military people move around a lot. And one place where they had to move to was the North. And when he was in the North, he was in a place where slavery was illegal. So his argument is that he should now be free. So the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time was Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, or Roger B. Taney, some people say. And so he's accredited really with the decision here. He was part of that majority vote. So the Dred Scott decision has two parts. Number one, they say that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. Now you're thinking, why in the world are we talking about the Missouri Compromise? The question is Dred Scott a free person now, or is he to remain a slave? And the Missouri Compromise isn't even legal anymore, remember, because the Kansas-Nebraska Act voided it. So why are we talking about the Missouri Compromise? Now, we're talking about the Missouri Compromise in this decision because of why they say it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court says that the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional because the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution says that no one can be deprived of their property without due process of law. And the argument here is that by banning the potential for slavery in Missouri, they are depriving people of their property without due process of law. Part two of the decision is that Dred Scott is not a citizen. Black people, slaves, are not citizens of the United States, and therefore they cannot sue in the court of law and in the Supreme Court. So this is a huge victory for the South. Southerners are very pumped up about this decision. The North, on the other hand, is worried that because of the ruling, slavery is now not going to be barred in any territory, and slavery is going to be open anywhere because it could be a violation of the Fifth Amendment if it's not. Republicans are worried that their party has now been stripped of their main issue, the spread of slavery, but it actually ends up helping the Republicans because it's going to widen the gap between the Northern and the Southern Democrats.